Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia Govea and this is my American Indian Studies final project. The topic I chose related to California Indian resistance, resurgence, and resilience was education. In this presentation, I'll be talking about how education was historically used as a tool for oppression and cultural erasure against Native Americans, especially in California, and how today Native communities are reclaiming education as a source for empowerment and cultural revival. Here's just a quick overview of all the topics that I will be discussing in my presentation. First, for Native communities in California, education was not a path to opportunity as many of us may see it. It was instead used as a tool of cultural destruction and erasure. From the late 1800s to mid 1900s, thousands of Native children were taken from their families and forced into boarding schools meant to erase their cultural identity. These institutions took children from tribes across California, including the Hoopa Valley Tribe, Round Valley Indian tribes, Pomo, Yurok, Cahuilla, and Paiute. Even in today's modern institutions, Native students still face microaggressions, racist mascots, and no sense of belonging. And finally, I'll be talking about how, despite generations of trauma, Native communities have fought back and resisted, legally, through activism and the creation of tribal colleges. First, I'm going to be introducing the boarding school era. Boarding schools like the Sherman Institute, Fort Bidwell, and St. Boniface were part of a U.S. project to forcibly assimilate Native children. Children were taken from their families with the use of threats. If parents refused to give up their children, they were threatened with imprisonment and they were threatened with being denied resources like food and clothing, which were already hard to come by at the reservations in which they lived at. Upon arrival, children were subjected to militaristic discipline. First, their bodies were washed with kerosene in order to cleanse them. Then their hair was cut, which was a sense of identity in Native culture, and they were renamed with white Christian names. They were also forbidden from speaking their native language and practicing their traditions, otherwise they would be punished. These Native children were also subjected to outing programs, which forced them into working hard labor jobs. These children would work as maids, cooks, and farmers within white households, with little to no pay and limited to no rights. They were basically being exploited as cheap labor. Many people may consider this slavery. And here I just included a picture of the Chiricahua Apache children arriving at the Carlisle Indian School, which was considered a model institution for many Native American boarding schools around the country. And now we'll go into more of the cruelties that these children were subjected to and small but important ways in which they resisted. In these institutions, Native children often faced malnourishment. They were also given shoes that were way too small and caused permanent damage and disfigurement to their feet. These boarding schools had disease outbreaks with diseases like tuberculosis, cholera, and influenza killing many children. Children were only sent home when they were deemed too sick to stay, often dying en route before even making it home. Native families could not afford to have their children's bodies returned to them, leading to hundreds of unmarked graves at boarding school cemeteries. Many Native children resisted, with some running away and others speaking their language and practicing their traditions in secret. It wasn't until 1978 that Native parents could legally prevent their children from being taken from them. And here's just a picture showing the cemetery at one of these boarding schools, which was filled with the unmarked graves of Native students. Every boarding school had a cemetery just like that. Now I'm going to be talking about how Native people resisted in legal ways by sharing the story of a young Paiute girl named Alice Piper. In 1924, 15-year-old Alice Piper sued the Big Pine School District for denying her admission to a newly built public school. Now, just a little background. During this time, natives like Piper that didn't live on a reservation were not recognized by the U.S. government as part of a tribe, so they were therefore seen as U.S. citizens. This means that Native families that didn't live on reservations would sometimes not fall under direct federal jurisdiction, meaning they weren't always forced into boarding schools, but local governments could still enforce segregation. They would have to attend lesser Indian Day schools that were purposefully underfunded and offered a limited curriculum. The court actually cited the unequal quality of the Indian school compared to the public school as a reason to support Piper's admission into the school, and ultimately, the California Supreme Court ruled in Alice Piper's favor. Piper versus Big Pine didn't just grant her and 6 other Native students admission into the school, but it also helped end school exclusion for Native children and was later cited in Brown versus Board of Education, which ended segregation in schools completely. And here's a picture of how Alice Piper's legacy was honored with a statue outside of the Big Pine School for her role in fighting for equality in education for Native students. Now I'm going to talk about how Native students still face racism even in today's modern institutions. Many Native students are forced to navigate campuses filled with colonial imagery, Indian mascots, and stereotypes. On one Kumeyaay campus, a Native student described seeing school buildings modeled after missions and students wearing disrespectful headdresses and face paint. These symbols evoke trauma, not pride. This turns campuses into uncomfortable places for Native students. And here from the personal account from the Native American student that visited the Kumeyaay campus are just two quotes, which the first one reads, "Imagine being surrounded by structures that mimic and celebrate the scenes where your ancestors were in fact abused and murdered. How valued, how comfortable, how safe would you feel in this setting?" And the second one reads, "A campus that continues to use a mascot is still a campus that is perpetuating harm on Native students." And here I just included a picture of the University of Illinois mascot Chief Illinois, which was seen as an offensive use of American Indian imagery and caused the university to actually be barred from hosting postseason events. And then the one on the bottom, I just included a little cartoon that depicts the prejudice appropriation of Native American imagery. And now I'm going to talk about cultural resurgence through tribal colleges. The tribal colleges, including the California Indian Nations College, Kumeyaay Community College, and California Tribal College, are transforming education for Native students. These colleges teach Native languages, culture, and identity, and create a sense of belonging and healing. Even though all the good that they're doing for the Native community, they still face obstacles like being underfunded and lacking accreditation. These tribal colleges represent a powerful form of resistance and resurgence. And here are just two quotes describing the impact and importance of these tribal colleges in the Native community. The first one reads, "There is a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, a sense of ease that the students end up feeling." And then, "We want to reverse erasure, we want to teach our culture, and we want to teach our history." These schools differ from mainstream colleges because they give Native students a sense of belonging and cultural identity, while also being a part of a movement to reverse cultural erasure and keep their history and culture alive. And here's just a picture of the first commencement ceremony of the California Indian Nations College in 2021. And finally, why this still matters. This still matters because Native communities experience trauma through education that was long-lasting and intended to destroy their culture and identity. This still matters because even now, Native students face racism, cultural erasure, and discomfort in mainstream educational spaces. Some steps that we can take in support are by supporting tribal colleges, removing and protesting racist mascots and imagery, remembering Native history and suffering, and listening to the voice of the Native community. And just for my final message, I would like to say that education was once used to destroy Native identity, but today it can be used to reclaim and restore it. And here are just all my sources and just where I got all my information from. Thank you.